The stars above Kepler 442 had never seen so many warships in one place. 400 vessels from 17 different worlds hung in the darkness like angry fireflies. Their hulls gleamed under the light of the distant sun. Some were sleek and silver. Others were bulky and covered in strange symbols. Each ship belonged to a member of the Galactic Council, and each one carried weapons meant to enforce their will. Commander Thalreen stood on the bridge of his flagship and felt satisfaction wash over him. His insectoid body clicked with pleasure as his multiple eyes scanned the tactical display. So much power. The humans wouldn't stand a chance. 400 warships against a handful of primitive explorers, he chittered to his second officer. This will be the easiest military action in Council history. The second officer bobbed his head in agreement. Everyone knew about humans. They were the emotional ones, the violent ones, the species too dangerous to be trusted with the secrets of civilized space. 200 years ago, the Council had politely but firmly told humanity to stay in their corner of the galaxy. The humans had agreed. They had gone home to their little blue world and stayed there. Until now. 3 weeks ago, Council sensors had detected human ships in unclaimed space. Not just 1 or 2 scout vessels, but an entire exploration fleet. They had built research stations. They had surveyed planets. They had acted like they belonged there. High Counselor Vormik had been furious. The reptilian leader's scales had flushed dark purple with rage when he heard the news. He called an emergency session of the Council. Within days, the largest military fleet in 1,000 years was assembled. The message was clear. Humanity needed to be reminded of their place. On one of the human research stations, Ambassador Jiwoo watched the Council fleet gather and felt her stomach tighten with worry. She was a slim woman with tired eyes and the patient expression of someone who had spent years trying to make others understand simple truths. She had been attempting to establish peaceful contact with the Council for months. They refused to listen. "Ambassador, we need to evacuate," said one of her aides, a young man named Quan, who monitored their long-range sensors. "That fleet isn't here to talk." Jiwoo nodded slowly. "I know. Begin evacuation procedures. Get everyone to the transport ships." She opened a communication channel to the Council fleet one more time. High Counselor Vormek's face appeared on her screen. His yellow eyes were cold, and his forked tongue flicked out as he spoke. "You have 48 hours to leave this system," he said. "If any human vessel remains after that time, we will destroy them all. This is your only warning." "Counselor, please listen," Jiwoo said, keeping her voice calm and respectful. "The old treaties expired 30 years ago. We have every legal right to explore unclaimed space. We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to—" "Silence," Vormik hissed. "Humanity has no rights beyond what the Council grants. You are children playing with fire. Leave now or burn." The communication ended. Jiwoo sat in the dark for a long moment. Then she activated her emergency transmitter and sent a message toward Earth. A message that would take days to arrive. A message that simply said, "We need help." The hours crawled past. The human researchers packed their equipment and boarded transport ships. Scientists who had spent months studying alien plant life now scrambled to save their data. Engineers who had been so excited to build humanity's first deep space research station now worked to dismantle it. But they couldn't evacuate everyone in 48 hours. There were too many people and too few ships. Jiwoo did the math and felt cold. At best, they could save maybe half the personnel. The deadline came and went. The Council fleet began to move forward, weapons charging. Their formations were perfect, practiced over centuries of military tradition. They had fought pirates and rebels. They had policed their borders with casual efficiency. They had never lost a battle. Commander Thalreen opened a channel to all human vessels. "This is your final warning. Surrender your ships and prepare to be boarded. Resist, and you will be destroyed." On the lead human transport ship, Captain Daesung listened to the ultimatum and shook his head. He was a solid man in his 50s, with gray streaks in his black hair, and the quiet confidence of someone who had seen much worse than an alien armada. He had been a military officer before retiring to escort exploration missions. Now he sat in the captain's chair of a lightly armed transport and watched 400 warships approach. "Captain, what do we do?" his pilot asked nervously. Dae-sung smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "We wait." "Wait for what?" "For the response to Ambassador Ji-woo's message." "Sir, that message was sent 3 days ago. Even if Earth responds immediately, help won't arrive for—" The pilot stopped talking. Every sensor on every ship in the system suddenly screamed warnings. Space itself seemed to twist and tear. A massive distortion formed at the edge of the system, bending light and gravity in ways that made no sense. Something was coming. Commander Thalreen stared at his sensors in confusion. "What is that? A stellar phenomenon? A black hole?" "No, Commander," his sensor officer said, his voice shaking. "It's a ship. A single ship. And it's huge." "Crew." The distortion cleared. The Indomitable dropped into normal space, like a knife, cutting through silk. It was 8 kilometers of brutal, efficient death. Where council ships were designed to look impressive and beautiful, the human warship looked designed to kill. Its hull was dark, gray, almost black, covered in layers of armor plating that seemed to drink in the light. Weapons bristled from every surface. Point defense turrets, missile batteries, rail cannons that looked like they could punch holes through planets. The ship didn't float gracefully like council vessels. It hung in space like a predator, still and patient. Commander Thalreen felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. "One ship," he whispered. They sent 1 ship against 400. The human warship powered up its systems. Energy readings spiked across every spectrum. The council fleet scattered slightly, unconsciously pulling back from the new arrival. A communication channel opened. Captain Dae-sung's face appeared on every council ship's display. But he wasn't calling from the transport anymore. He wore a crisp military uniform now, and behind him stood a bridge crew at battle stations. He had been on the Indomitable all along, waiting. "This is Captain Dae-sung of the Earth warship Indomitable," he said calmly. "You are threatening civilian vessels in unclaimed space. You have violated interstellar law. I am authorized to defend these people by any means necessary." High Counselor Vormek laughed, a harsh hissing sound. "1 ship? You bring 1 ship against the might of the Galactic Council? Your arrogance will be your death, human." Dae-sung's expression didn't change. "I'm giving you 1 chance. Withdraw peacefully. Go home. Forget this ever happened. Or stay and learn why humanity doesn't build pretty ships." The council commanders looked at each other. 1 ship. 1 primitive human ship against the greatest fleet ever assembled. Vormek gave the order. "All ships, open fire. Destroy them." 300 council warships unleashed hell itself. Number, the arrival. The weapons fire lit up the darkness like a second sun. Plasma bolts, particle beams, and antimatter missiles streaked across the void. 300 warships firing at once created a light show that would be visible from planets dozens of light years away. The energy output was enough to vaporize a moon. The council commanders watched their displays and waited for the human ship to become debris. On the bridge of the Times, Indomitable Asterisk, Lieutenant Myung sat at the weapons station and watched the incoming fire with calm eyes. She was a young woman with her hair tied back severely and fingers that never stopped moving across her controls. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life. "Impact in 5 seconds, she reported. 4, 3, 2, 1. The barrage hit the Times, Indomitable Times like an ocean wave hitting a mountain, and the mountain didn't move. The human warship's point defense systems came alive. Thousands of small turrets tracked and destroyed incoming missiles before they could reach the hull. Energy shields, invisible until they were struck, flared brilliant blue as they absorbed particle beams and plasma fire. What few shots made it through both layers of defense simply scorched the outer armor plating, leaving black marks that faded as heat-resistant coating did its job. The Times. Indomitable Times sat in the middle of an inferno and didn't even shudder. Commander Thalreen stared at his display in disbelief. Impossible. Nothing can withstand that much firepower. Nothing. Commander, their shields are holding at 97%, his sensor officer reported, voice cracking with stress. The damage to their hull is minimal. Cosmetic at best. Fire again. All ships, concentrate fire on their shield generators. The Council fleet obeyed. Another massive barrage hammered into the human ship. This time, the humans didn't even bother using shields for most of it. They let the fire wash over their armor like rain. On the Times Indomitable's Times Bridge, Captain Dae Sung sighed. They had their chance. Myung, return fire. One salvo. Show them what we brought. Yes, sir. Myung's fingers danced across her console. Railgun batteries 1 through 6. Targeting solutions locked. Firing. The Times. Indomitable's Times. Main weapons were simple in concept. They were cannons. Very, very large cannons that used magnetic acceleration instead of explosives. Humanity had been building bigger and better guns for thousands of years. These were just the latest model. 12 tungsten carbide slugs, each weighing 20 tons, launched from the ship's spine. They accelerated to 95% of light speed in less than a second. The energy required to do this could power a city for a year. The Times Indomitable Times had enough reactor capacity to fire these weapons hundreds of times. The slugs crossed the distance between the ships in heartbeats. 12 Council warships simply ceased to exist. The kinetic energy of the impacts was so enormous that the vessels didn't explode. They vaporized. Matter converted directly to energy. For a brief moment, 12 new stars blazed in the void, then faded to expanding clouds of plasma. The Council fleet stopped firing. Silence fell across all channels. 400 ships hung in space, their commanders trying to understand what they had just witnessed. By the ancestors. Someone whispered, on an open channel. What are they? High Counselor Vormek found his voice first. All ships. Evasive maneuvers. Scatter and regroup at rally point 7, but the human ship was already moving. The Times, Indomitable Times, didn't lumber like Council dreadnoughts. It didn't glide gracefully like their cruisers. It moved like a striking snake, instant acceleration in directions that should have been impossible. Chief Engineer Boram sat deep in the ship's core, surrounded by displays showing power distribution across every system. She was a stocky woman, with oil stains on her uniform and the focused expression of someone solving a complex puzzle. Her job was to keep the Times, Indomitable Times, fighting, no matter what. Redirecting power to forward shields, she called out to her team. Engines at 70%. Weapons capacitors charging. We're good for another 12 shots before we need to cycle the radiators. The ship shuddered as it accelerated. In the Council fleet, such acceleration would have turned the crew into paste against the back walls. But human inertial dampeners, technology the Council had never quite mastered, kept everyone safe and comfortable. The Times, Indomitable Times, dove into the Council formation like a shark into a school of fish. Myung fired again. 6 more shots. 6 more Council ships died, punched through by projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The physics were simple and brutal. At those velocities, it didn't matter what kind of shields or armor you had. Kinetic energy won. Always. Commander Thalreen screamed orders, trying to organize his fleet. Some ships fled. Others tried to surround the human vessel, to bring their superior numbers to bear. A few brave captains charged forward, firing everything they had. The Times, Indomitable Times, destroyed them almost casually. Wing Commander Subin sat in the launch bay, watching her fighter squadrons prepare. She was a compact woman, with scars on her hands from years of maintenance work on her own craft. She had flown every type of human fighter ever built. Now she commanded 200 of the best pilots humanity could produce. "All wings, this is Su Bin," she said into her comm. "Launch in 30 seconds. Rules of engagement are simple. The big fish are for the ship. We handle the small ones. And remember, these people have never seen real fighter combat. Show them how it's done." The launch bay doors opened. 200 human fighters screamed out into space. They were small, ugly craft compared to Council interceptors. No elegant curves or decorative fins. Just engines, weapons, and pilots. But they moved like nothing the Council had ever seen. They could turn on a single point. They could reverse direction in an instant. And each one carried enough firepower to threaten a Council cruiser. The Council fleet tried to adapt. Admiral Pressescal, a seasoned commander from a species that looked like walking plants, took control of the scattered forces. He organized them into a new formation, concentrating fire while sending fast attack squadrons to flank the human ship. It was a good plan. It had won battles for thousands of years. It failed in minutes. The humans were listening to every Council communication. They spoke the languages fluently. They knew the tactical doctrine better than some Council officers. By the time Admiral Pressescal's flanking squadrons moved into position, the times, indomitable times, had already shifted to counter them. Myung launched missiles. Not crude chemical rockets like the Council used, but sophisticated weapons. With their own sensors and AI-guided targeting, they weaved through defensive fire, adapted to countermeasures, and struck with precision. 20 Council ships crippled in a single salvo. Su Bin's fighters tore through the Council interceptors like wolves through sheep. The alien pilots were brave and well-trained, but they had never fought an enemy that could outmaneuver them so completely. Human fighters didn't dogfight. They ambushed. They struck from impossible angles, and were gone before return fire could lock on. The battle raged for an hour. The Council fleet threw everything they had at the single human warship. They tried focused fire. They tried spreading out. They tried ramming attacks. Nothing worked. The Times. Indomitable Times was taking damage now. Shields flickered and failed in sections. Hull breaches appeared. Damage reports flowed to the bridge. 3 crew members dead. 15 wounded. Fires on Deck 7. Power conduit failure. In Section 12. But for every hit the human ship took, 10 Council vessels died or fled. Captain Daesung watched the tactical display and felt no satisfaction, only sadness. This wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. These alien commanders had never fought a real war. They had no idea what humanity had learned in 10,000 years of killing each other. He opened a channel to the Council fleet. "You still have a chance to withdraw. I didn't come here to commit genocide. Leave now, and this ends." Commander Thalreen, his flagship burning and half his crew dead, screamed back. "Never. The Council does not retreat from primitives." Daesung's expression hardened. He looked at Myung. "Activate the Nova Protocol." Myung's hands hesitated over her controls for just a moment. Then she nodded. "Nova Protocol activated. Charging now." Around the bridge, crew members exchanged glances. They all knew what was coming. They had all hoped it wouldn't be necessary, but the Council had made their choice. Number. The Nova Protocol. The Times. Indomitable Times went dark. Every weapon fell silent. The engines cut to minimal power. The great warship simply drifted, trailing smoke and debris from a dozen hull breaches. Warning lights blinked across its scarred surface. To any observer, it looked like a dying vessel taking its last breath. Commander Thalreen saw the human ship go silent and felt hope surge through his battered body. "They're finished. All ships, close in and prepare boarding parties. We take that ship intact. I want their technology. I want their databases. I want everything." What remained of the Council fleet roughly 240 ships, moved forward eagerly. They had paid a terrible price, but victory was finally in sight. Once they captured the human vessel and learned its secrets, this disaster could be turned into triumph. Admiral Prez's call was more cautious. Something felt wrong. Commander Thalreen, I suggest we maintain distance. This could be a trap. A trap? Thalreen laughed, a clicking, chittering sound. Look at them. They're dead in space. Their weapons are offline. What trap could they possibly? Deep inside the Time's indomitable asterisk, in a heavily shielded chamber that sat at the very center of the ship, Dr. Sangmi monitored her displays with absolute focus. She was a small woman with burn scars on her arms from a laboratory accident years ago, and eyes that rarely blinked when she was concentrating. She was humanity's leading expert in weaponized physics, and right now she was overseeing the activation of her most terrible creation, the Nova Cannon. Charge at 80%, she reported to the bridge. 90. Containment fields holding. All 12 fusion reactors feeding into the primary coil. Energy transfer looking good. Ah, Creeding 2. Creeding 2. Captain Dae-sung listened to her updates and felt the weight of what he was about to do. The Nova Cannon wasn't just a weapon. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity could, if pushed far enough, harness the power of stars themselves. How long until we can fire? He asked. 30 seconds. 25. The targeting system is locked on the center of their formation. On the view screen, Council ships were closing in. Boarding craft launched. Marines in sealed armor prepared to storm the human vessel. They had no idea what was coming. Dr. Sangmi, Dae-sung said quietly. Fire when ready. Yes, sir. Firing in 10 seconds. 9. 8. The Council fleet closed to within 1,000 kilometers. Their sensors detected a massive energy buildup in the human ship, but they couldn't identify what it was for. Their databases had no reference for this kind of power signature. 3, 2, 1, firing. The Nova Cannon didn't fire a beam or a projectile. It fired a packet of compressed space-time, invisible to sensors and moving at the speed of light. Inside that packet was matter energy equivalent to the core of a star at the moment of fusion ignition. Held in stasis by fields that bent physics in ways that shouldn't be possible. The packet traveled for 2 seconds before reaching the center of the Council formation. Then, the containment field collapsed. For 3 milliseconds, a star was born in the void of space. The light was so bright that automatic safety systems on every ship blacked out view screens. The heat was so intense that ships 20,000 kilometers away felt their hulls begin to glow. The electromagnetic pulse fried electronics across the entire system, and at the center, where the star briefly lived, 60 Council ships simply stopped existing. They didn't explode. They didn't burn. The matter that made up their hulls, their crews, their dreams and memories and 1,000-year-old battle honors, all converted to energy in an instant. When the light faded, an expanding sphere of plasma marked where the ships had been. The shockwave came next. It moved outward at a significant fraction of light speed. A wall of superheated particles and radiation. 100 Council ships caught by the wave were crippled instantly. Hulls cracked. Reactors failed. Life support shut down. Crews that survived the initial blast found themselves drifting in dying ships, screaming for help that would never come. The remaining ships scattered in pure panic. All formation discipline collapsed. Captains abandoned their posts. Some crews mutinied, demanding their officers flee. Admiral Pressescal tried to restore order, but his communications were drowned out by terror. Commander Thalreen sat on his damaged bridge and watched his fleet die. His compound eyes couldn't process what he was seeing. His mind couldn't accept it. One ship. One human ship. Against the greatest military force the Council could assemble. And the humans were winning. The Times. Indomitable Times came back to life. Engines reactivated. Shields came back online. Weapons began tracking targets. The ship had never been disabled. It had been charging its ultimate weapon while pretending to be helpless. Captain Dae-sung's voice cut through every council communication channel. His tone was calm, almost gentle, but his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. You came here to destroy us. We warned you. We gave you chances to leave. You refused every one. Now, you will carry a message back to your council. Tell them what happened here. Tell them what we are capable of. Tell them that humanity will no longer be ignored or threatened. The Times. Indomitable Times began to move through the scattered remnants of the council fleet. But it didn't fire randomly. Each shot was precise, targeted, almost surgical. It disabled ships rather than destroying them. It crippled engines but left life support intact. It was no longer fighting a battle. It was teaching a lesson. Myung fired the railguns with careful aim. One shot took out a cruiser's main reactor, leaving it powerless but alive. Another shot destroyed a dreadnought's weapons, turning it harmless. She was no longer trying to kill. She was demonstrating control, showing that humanity could destroy or spare with equal ease. Wing Commander Subin's fighters herded fleeing ships, forcing them into predictable flight paths. When council captains tried to jump to hyperspace, the fighters disabled their faster-than-light drives with pinpoint missile strikes. The message was clear. You will leave when we say you can leave. Colonel Hyun-woo, commander of the Times, Indomitable's Times Marine Forces, watched the battle from the ship's armory. He was a solid man with gray at his temples and the patient expression of someone who had seen too much combat. His Marines were ready to board enemy vessels if needed, but it didn't look like that would be necessary. Stand down, he told his troops. Looks like the captain has this under control. Secure your equipment and prepare for possible rescue operations. We might need to pull survivors out of damaged ships. One of his younger Marines looked confused. Sir, we're rescuing the enemy? Hyun-woo nodded. That's right. We're not here to genocide an entire fleet. We're here to make a point. Can't make a point if everyone's dead. Dead men don't carry messages. On the council flagship, what was left of it, Counselor Eshran watched the human ship hunt her people and felt something break inside her. She was a junior counselor, barely important enough to be on this mission. But she understood something that her superiors had missed. Humanity had been holding back. During their first contact 2 centuries ago, when they showed the Council their early spacecraft and primitive weapons, they had been holding back. When they agreed to stay in their home systems, when they accepted the Council's restrictions, when they smiled and nodded and retreated to Earth, they had been holding back. All this time, they had been holding back. The humans didn't have primitive weapons. They had weapons that could birth stars. They didn't have slow, clumsy ships. They had vessels that could dance through fire and emerge unscathed. They didn't have undisciplined emotional minds. They had cold, precise, tactical thinking honed by millennia of warfare. The Council had dismissed humanity as dangerous children. They were wrong. Humanity were dangerous adults who had chosen to be patient, until patience ran out. The battle, if it could still be called that, continued for another hour. The Times, Indomitable Times, systematically dismantled what remained of the Council's ability to fight. When it was done, 89 ships remained functional enough to limp home. The rest were dead, crippled, or scattered across the system. Captain Dae-sung broadcast one final message to the survivors. You are free to leave. Return to your council. Tell them what happened here. Tell them humanity demands a seat at the table. Tell them the age of ignoring us is over. And tell them that if they ever threaten civilian human vessels again, we won't be this merciful. The surviving ships fled. They jumped to hyperspace as fast as their damaged drives would allow, desperate to escape the nightmare that the Kepler 442 system had become. The Times' Indomitable Times remained, floating among the debris. Rescue shuttles launched to search for survivors in damaged ships. Medical teams prepared to treat wounded, both human and alien. Because despite everything, Despite the carnage and the terror, humanity still believed in mercy. They just also believed in making very, very clear what happened when you mistook mercy for weakness. Number 3 days after the battle, 17 human warships sat in orbit around the Galactic Council's homeworld. They had arrived without warning, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't issue threats. They simply existed there, dark and silent against the stars. Their presence alone was enough. Admiral Heijin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Time's unconquered Asterisk, and watched the Council homeworld turn slowly below. She was a tall woman with iron-gray hair and the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile years ago. She had commanded Earth's fleets for 2 decades, and in all that time, she had been preparing for this moment. "Any response from the Council?" she asked her communications officer. "Yes, Admiral. Counselor Prime Zelvok is requesting a meeting. She sounds frightened." "Good. Fear is the beginning of wisdom. Tell her I'll meet with the full Council in 2 hours. And make sure our ships maintain their positions. I want them to see us every time they look up." On the surface, in the great council chambers that had stood for 3,000 years, chaos reigned. Councilors from 17 species argued and shouted. Some demanded immediate military action. Others called for negotiation. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what had happened. Counselor Prime Zelvok was an ancient being, her species living for centuries. She had seen wars and peace treaties, the rise and fall of civilizations, but she had never seen anything like this. 400 ships sent out. 89 returned. The rest were debris, or captured by human rescue teams. High Counselor Vormek was dead. Commander Thalreen was alive, but broken, sitting in a medical facility and staring at walls. The carefully maintained illusion of Council military superiority had shattered in a single day. "Order! I demand order!" Zelvok's voice cut through the arguing. The chamber fell silent. "Fighting among ourselves solves nothing. The humans are here. They are in orbit above our homeworld. We must deal with this reality. One Pentris, we could just devire that. We must deal with this reality." Counselor Eshron stood up. She had returned on one of the surviving ships, and she had spent the journey writing a detailed report of everything she had witnessed. Now she looked around at her fellow counselors and saw the same fear and confusion she felt. "Counselor Prime, I was there. I saw what the humans can do. We cannot fight them. We were fools to try." An older counselor, a being that looked like a walking mass of tentacles, bristled with anger. "Are you suggesting we surrender? That we bow to these primitives? I'm suggesting we face facts." Eshron's voice was sharp. "We attacked civilian vessels. Without provocation. We brought overwhelming force against people who were legally in unclaimed space. We started this, and we lost. Badly. They used a weapon that creates stars," someone shouted. "That kind of power is illegal under galactic law." Lath. Unwell. Clam. Unwell. 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 Eshron laughed bitterly. "We tried to exterminate them, and you're worried about legal technicalities? Besides, which law? The laws we write? The humans never signed those treaties. They were never part of our council. We can't hold them to rules. They never agreed to. Sikli Zansa. We can faction Madig." Zelvok raised a hand for silence. "The human admiral will be here in 2 hours. I suggest we decide what we're going to say before then." Nextan. 2 hours later, Admiral Heijin materialized in the council chambers via transport beam. She was accompanied by Ambassador Jiwoo and Captain Unji, commander of a human diplomatic vessel. The 3 women stood before the assembled council and looked completely unafraid. Zelvok studied them carefully. The admiral had the bearing of a career military officer, all hard edges and controlled strength. The ambassador looked tired, but determined. The captain was younger, watching everything with sharp eyes. Admiral Hagen, Zelvok began carefully. Peaceful resolution? Hagen's voice was cold. You sent 400 warships to destroy civilian explorers. Where was your desire for peace then? The council chamber fell silent. No one had an answer. Hagen continued. But we're not here for revenge. Despite what you may think of us, humanity doesn't glory in slaughter. We came in peace 200 years ago. We've been trying to make peaceful contact for months. You refused to listen, so we made you listen. Now, you will hear our terms. She pulled up a holographic display showing a list of demands. As she read them out, counselors shifted uncomfortably. First, formal recognition of human sovereignty over all our worlds and colonies. Second, unrestricted human access to unclaimed space. Third, revocation of all treaties that confined humanity to our home systems. Fourth, reparations for the unprovoked attack on our civilians. Zelvok nodded slowly. These terms are... No, Hagen's expression hardened. There's one more thing. You will help us hunt down and destroy the Voidborn. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Zelvok held up a hand for silence, but her own face had gone pale. Ambassador Ji Woo stepped forward. We've known about them for 20 years. We've been fighting them in secret while you debated and delayed. Captain Yunji activated a new holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the council. Images of battles, of strange, organic-looking ships that moved like schools of fish, of planets stripped bare of all life, of human vessels fighting desperately against overwhelming numbers. The Voidborn are an extragalactic species, Yunji explained. They consume everything, planets, stars, entire civilizations. They've been working their way through the outer rim for decades. You knew about them. Your deep space monitoring stations detected them years ago. But you did nothing. Zelvok couldn't deny it. The council had known. They had received reports. But the Voidborn were so far away, and dealing with them would be expensive and difficult. So they had formed committees. They had conducted studies. They had debated endlessly about the best course of action. While they debated, the Voidborn got closer. Humanity didn't have the luxury of debate, Hagen said. Our colony worlds are on the frontier. When the Voidborn came, we fought them. We've lost 3 colonies, 17,000 people dead. We've destroyed hundreds of Voidborn vessels, but they keep coming. And they'll reach Council space in 5 years. The chamber fell silent. 5 years. It seemed like a long time. But for civilizations that thought in centuries, it was the blink of an eye. Counselor Eshran stood up again. Admiral, why didn't you tell us? Why fight alone? We tried to tell you. Jiwoo said quietly. We sent diplomatic missions. We shared our sensor data. We begged for help. You ignored every message. You were too busy treating us like dangerous children to listen when we warned you about the real danger. Hagen walked to the center of the chamber, making sure every counselor could see her face. Here's the truth you need to understand. The Voidborn will destroy everything in their path. They don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They just consume. You can't debate with them. You can't form a committee to study them. You can only fight them, and you don't know how to fight. She gestured at Captain Daesung's image on the display, showing the times, indomitable times in battle. We sent 1 warship against 400 of yours. 1. That wasn't even close to our full strength. We have 100 ships like the Time's indomitable asterisk. We have weapons you've never imagined. We have soldiers who train for war from childhood, because we have always known, that the universe is not safe. Why? Asked a counselor. Why are you so prepared for war? Hagen's smile was sad. Because we fought each other for 10,000 years. We killed each other with rocks and sticks, then swords and spears, then guns and bombs, then missiles and drones. We fought 2 global wars that killed hundreds of millions. We built weapons that could destroy our entire world. We learned every possible way to kill, because we're very, very good at it. 2. She paused, letting that sink in. But we also learned when to stop fighting. We learned to work together. We learned that survival matters more than pride, and now we're offering to teach you. Zelvok looked around the chamber at her fellow counselors. She saw fear. Yes, but also the first glimmers of understanding. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. A real alliance, Ambassador Jiwoo said. Not council superiority with humanity as a junior member. Not you making decisions and us following orders. A partnership. Your resources and production capacity, our military expertise and technology. Together, we might survive what's coming. Captain Unji brought up new images. Projections showing the Voidborn advance. Simulations of what would happen if they reached council space unopposed. The numbers were horrifying. Captain Unji. Captain 10, you have a choice, Heejin said simply. Work with us, or die separately. Your pride already cost you 300 ships and thousands of lives. How much more are you willing to pay to keep pretending you're superior? The vote was called. The debate lasted hours. Some counselors refused to accept human terms. Others argued passionately for alliance. In the end, it came down to Counselor Prime Zelvak's decision. She looked at the human admiral and saw not an enemy, but perhaps the galaxy's only hope. The council accepts your terms, she said quietly. All of them. Number the shield and the sword. 6 months after the battle at Kepler 442, the galaxy was changing in ways no one could have predicted. Human warships patrolled sectors that had never seen military vessels before. Council factories that once built luxury goods now produced weapons and armor. Species that had spent millennia avoiding conflict now trained with human marines, learning how to fight. Captain Dae-sung stood on the observation deck of a massive space station orbiting a frontier world and watched the transformation happening below. The station had been built in just 4 months, a joint project between human engineers and council construction teams. It served as both a military base and a training facility, and it was one of 15 such stations now protecting the outer rim. Hard to believe, isn't it? Said a voice behind him. He turned to find Counselor Eshron approaching. She visited the station often, overseeing the integration of council forces with human military doctrine. What's hard to believe? Dae-sung asked. That we're working together. 6 months ago, we were trying to kill each other. Now we're building defenses side by side. Dae-sung smiled slightly. War makes strange friends, and the enemy of my enemy, as they say. They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching construction drones move materials into position. Below them, on the station's training levels, council soldiers practiced combat maneuvers under the watchful eyes of human instructors. Your people are learning quickly, Dae-sung observed. Eshron nodded. We're motivated. The Voidborn attacks on the outer colonies have gotten worse. 3 more settlements lost last month. If we don't stop them soon. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Deep in the station's command center, Admiral Heejin reviewed tactical reports with her staff. Wing Commander Subin was there, along with Colonel Hyun-woo and several council military leaders. The room was crowded with beings from a dozen different species, all focused on the same goal. The Voidborn are adapting to our tactics, Subin reported, highlighting sections of a star map. They're sending smaller, faster groups instead of massive swarms. Harder to detect, harder to intercept. They're learning from us, Hyun-woo added. Which means they're more intelligent than we initially thought. A council general, a being named Presseskal, who had survived the battle at Kepler 442, spoke up. My scouts report increased activity in Sector 14. It could be a feint, or it could be preparation for a major push. Heejin studied the map carefully. We need to hit them before they can organize. Su Bin, take the 3rd Fighter Wing and conduct reconnaissance in force. Hyun Woo, prepare your Marines for possible boarding actions. If we can capture a Voidborn ship intact, we might learn more about them. The meeting continued for another hour, planning and coordinating a response that would have been impossible half a year ago. Council forces bringing their knowledge of local space, human forces bringing their combat experience. Working together, they were stronger than either could be alone. On Earth, in the Great Assembly Hall where world leaders gathered, Ambassador Ji Woo addressed a crowd of diplomats and politicians. She had returned home briefly to report on the alliance's progress. The integration is going better than we hoped, she told them. The Council species are eager to learn. They've seen what the Voidborn can do, and they understand the stakes. But there are still challenges. What kind of challenges? Asked one of the Earth representatives. Cultural ones, mostly. The Council thinks in terms of centuries. They want to plan and prepare and study before acting. We need them to understand that sometimes you have to shoot first and study later. They're getting there. But it takes time. She pulled up images of joint training exercises. Council soldiers working alongside human Marines. Council engineers studying human weapons technology. Council pilots learning aggressive combat maneuvers from Su Bin's fighter squadrons. The key is respect, Ji Woo continued. We're not trying to dominate them or prove we're superior. We're teaching them what we know. And we're learning from them in return. Their scientists have insights into physics we never considered. Their medical technology is decades ahead of ours in some areas. End quote. This alliance works both ways. In the Outer Rim, aboard the Times, Indomitable Asterisk, Lieutenant Myung was training a group of Council weapons officers. They watched her work with a mixture of awe and confusion. Your weapons are so direct, one of them said. No elegance, no finesse, just raw power. Myung smiled. That's the point. In battle, you don't need elegance. You need effectiveness. A railgun doesn't care about looking pretty. It cares about punching through enemy armor. She showed them the targeting systems, explaining how human weapons prioritized speed and accuracy over everything else. The Council officers took notes frantically, trying to absorb decades of human weapons development in a few short lessons. But what about the Nova Cannon? One asked nervously. Will you teach us how to build that? Myung's smile faded. No. That weapon is. It's a last resort. Something we built because we had to, not because we wanted to. Trust me. You don't want to know how to make stars explode. On the frontier world of New Horizon, Chief Engineer Boram worked with Council technicians to upgrade their defensive platforms. She had discovered that while Council technology was sophisticated, it wasn't designed for sustained combat. Their shields were elegant, but fragile. Their weapons were precise, but weak. You built everything for peace, she explained to her Council counterparts. Together, they designed hybrid systems. Council shield technology, powered by human reactors. Council sensors, integrated with human weapons platforms. The result was defensive stations that combined the best of both civilizations. 3 months later, the Voidborn came. They hit Sector 14 in force, just as Pressescal had predicted. Thousands of organic-looking ships poured out of dark space, moving like a living swarm. They had never attacked in such numbers before. The new defensive stations activated immediately. Human-designed early warning systems gave defenders precious minutes to prepare. Joint response fleets, made up of both human and Council vessels, jumped to intercept. The battle that followed was brutal and chaotic. But this time, the Council ships didn't flee. They stood their ground, using tactics learned from human instructors. Their weapons, upgraded with human technology, actually hurt the Voidborn. Their shields, reinforced with human power systems, withstood the assault. Captain Daesung commanded the defense from the Times' Indomitable Asterisk. Around him, Council ships fought with a determination that would have seemed impossible a year ago. They took casualties. They suffered damage. But they didn't break. Wing Commander Subin's fighters, now including Council pilots, weaved through the Voidborn swarm with deadly precision. The alien pilots flew human-designed craft and used human tactics, and they were terrifyingly effective. Colonel Hyunwoo's Marines, working with Council boarding teams, managed to capture 2 Voidborn vessels intact. The ships were like nothing they'd ever seen, more grown than built. But the teams secured them and transmitted data back to the science divisions. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Voidborn had been repelled. Not destroyed completely, but hurt badly enough that they withdrew. It was the first major victory against them. As the fleets returned to base for repairs, Counselor Eshran sent a message to Admiral Haejin. "We won. We actually won." Haejin's response was characteristically blunt. "We won one battle. The war isn't over. But yes, this is a good start." A year after the battle at Kepler 442, the galaxy held a celebration. Representatives from all Council species gathered on a neutral world to formally establish the new alliance. It was called the United Front, and it represented something unprecedented. Species that had spent millennia avoiding war, now preparing to fight together. Admiral Haejin gave a speech that was broadcast across 1,000 worlds. "A year ago, you saw us as primitives, as dangerous children who needed to be controlled. Maybe we are dangerous, but we're dangerous to your enemies, not to you. We didn't ask for this war with the Voidborn, but we'll fight it, and we'll win it, because that's what humanity does. We survive. And now, you'll survive with us." Captain Dae-sung stood with Counselor Eshran and watched the ceremony. The Times, indomitable Times, floated in orbit above them, no longer alone. It was accompanied by a fleet of Council vessels, all bearing the new alliance insignia. "Do you think we can really win?" Eshran asked quietly. Dae-sung considered the question. "I think we have a chance. A real chance. The Voidborn are strong, but they're not invincible. Nothing is. And now you have something you never had before." "What's that?" "You have humans. And we're very, very good at killing things that threaten us." The celebration continued below, but Dae-sung looked out toward the dark spaces between the stars. The Voidborn were out there, preparing their next assault. But this time, the galaxy would be ready. Because humanity had become the galaxy's sword, cutting down threats others couldn't face, and the Council species had become the shield, providing resources and support for the long war ahead. Together, they would stand. Together, they would fight. And together, perhaps they would survive. On distant worlds, people looked up at the night sky and saw human warships on patrol. They felt fear, yes, but also something else. Something they hadn't felt in a long time. They felt safe. And across the galaxy, a new saying spread from world to world, whispered in 100 languages by a dozen species. Pray, you never see a human warship, because when you do, it means something has gone terribly wrong. But also know that when you see one, it means you're protected, because humanity, for all their violence and brutality, for all their terrible weapons and ruthless tactics, had made a choice. They chose to be the monsters that hunt monsters. They chose to stand between civilization and the darkness. And they would never, ever back down.